Are you dealing with clothes, bedding, and towels that still don't smell fresh after the wash? Check out Blueland's new Power Duo laundry tablets for loads that need extra stain and odor-fighting power. Blueland makes household cleaning products designed to reduce single-use plastic. Their plastic-free, microplastic-free formulas are made with plant and mineral-based cleaning ingredients and without dyes, parabens, or harsh chemicals. So ditch the plastic bottle and drop a pre-measured, mess-free Power Duo laundry tablet directly into the drum for your next wash. Blueland is a certified B Corp and Leaping Bunny cruelty-free certified. Their formulas are EPA's Safer Choice certified, and many products have also earned Cradle to Cradle's Gold Material Health Certificate. If you're looking to make a small change in your routine, you can get 15% off your first order at blueland.com/PRX. That's 15% off your first order at blueland.com/PRX.
For years, West Virginia has been at the center of America's opioid epidemic. For roughly a decade, the state was at the top of the nation's overdose fatality deaths. However, there is some encouraging news. Overdose deaths in West Virginia have fallen dramatically. State officials reported a nearly 38% decline in the 12 months ending in November 2024. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. In 2024, parental substance use disorder remained the most common reason children in West Virginia were removed from their homes. And that raises another question. What happens to the people left in addiction's wake? From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. I'm Trey Kay. Recently, I was invited to West Virginia University in Morgantown for the Raleigh Sullivan Addiction Training Institute. It's an annual gathering of clinicians, counselors, social workers, and others who do work with people affected by addiction. One evening at the conference, we watched a film called What We Hide.
Jesse, anyone finds out she's dead, they're gonna separate us.
This is Child Services.
How would you say your mom's doing?
From now on, we lock the door when we leave the house. Nothing to nobody. I need to hear you say it.
Nothing to nobody. How long you think we can keep this up, Spider?
Hello, girls. Your mama has not called me.
As long as we have to. We just gotta keep doing what we're doing.
Spider and Jessie are sisters. Spider is 15, Jessie is 10. Their mother has died from an overdose. Terrified that Child Protective Services will separate them, the girls hide their mother's death and try to carry on by themselves.
Spider, maybe we should just tell someone. I mean, ain't you tired of this?
That's the last thing we need right now. There's somebody else poking around in our business.
Hey, Jace? You home?
Whatever troubles you got.
I want that extra $200 every month, you understand me? You understand me, girl?
Yes, yes.
That's a lot worse out there.
Seems like every day there's more and more overdoses and kids are being left without their parents.
Could you come to the door, please?
They're gonna separate us.
What are you gonna do?
I ain't gonna let them take us away. I'll die before I let them break us up.
I ain't done with you, Spider.
You did what you had to. Nothing wrong with it.
I love you. Love you too.
After a screening of the movie, What We Hide, I moderated a conversation with the film's writer and director, Dan Kay, who is no relation to me. Kay's film is not based on one real-life story. Instead, it focuses on a fictionalized account of the realities drug addiction and overdose deaths can bring to rural communities and families. We were joined in conversation by addiction psychiatrist Dr. James Berry of West Virginia University's Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute. Morgantown clinical social worker Dolly Sullivan was also part of the conversation. She's married to Raleigh Sullivan, who the training seminar is named after. Dan Kay told us the idea for his movie came out of a question he couldn't shake.
I'd been interested in the subject of addiction, but even more specifically, I was very interested in the collateral damage caused by addiction. I felt that there have been some terrific films and plays and articles and books that are focused on the addict's experience, which is very valuable. But I didn't think there'd been much where particularly in film, where we were exploring what is left in the addict's wake. What is family, friends? What is that existence like? And I don't remember if it was a podcast or an article, but I heard the term opioid orphans, and it all just kind of clicked for me. I just felt that would be a really interesting place to explore this idea of the collateral damage caused by addiction. And once I had that term and that concept, I did a lot of research and wrote the script and eventually made the movie.
Well, and when I was writing my questions, one of the things I wrote was, what is left in the wake of addiction? I'm just curious, like, why did you decide to start it right there, like at the passing of their mother?
Well, because I didn't want to waste any time. I didn't think it was necessary. This wasn't a story about addiction in that concrete sense. It was a story about what's left behind. And so I felt like it was first of all very dramatic entree into the story to open it that way. But I also wanted to get into the story of what these two girls do. How do they survive? What are they thinking? What are they going through in the moments, days, weeks after their mother's death? And it was just organic. It just felt like that was the way to begin this movie and to get us right into the story for these two girls.
Jim Berry, Dr. Berry, we're here at the Addiction Training Institute, and this is an annual conference filled with addiction professionals, counselors, social workers, researchers, clinicians. Yet here we are. We're talking about a feature film. So why is watching this film important to this group of professionals?
Why the movie? And the longer I have been at this job of trying to both help people who have addiction, but then also help teach and train those who want to help people who struggle with addiction, the more I realize that just giving people sort of the science and what we call didactic portions and the education only goes so far, and really recognize the importance of our full humanity and the humanities in helping us to truly understand our condition. And I think that stories, films, books, poetry, song, etc., have an ability to speak to who we are and what our needs are in ways that just mere lectures don't really accomplish. And so I think that those who were part of this experience watching this film come away with a type of knowledge about the addiction and the aftermath of addiction that I can't draw on a chalkboard.
Dan, you're really talking about the kind of the heartbeat and the emotion, and the emotion of this film is really these two sisters, the characters Spider and Jessie. And there's several things that you've talked about that we'll maybe get into some of the discussion today, but I'd like to hear a little bit about how you came up with the relationship between these two sisters. And I also know that here we are in Central Appalachia, that a lot of your research really had to do with the issues that we have in this area. We have issues with addiction. We also have a really challenged foster care system. So can you speak about that a little bit?
Well, one of the things that in doing my research, and also just, again, this is a topic that's for personal reasons has been interesting to me for forever. One of the things that really struck me when in talking to folks who have been impacted by having family members suffer from substance use disorder is you can get varying perspectives depending on the age of, in particular, I'm talking about children here, but depending on the age of the children, and hearing stories from teenage girls, let's say, who talk about just the anger that they hold on to because their parent was suffering from addiction, was unavailable, was making horrific choices, putting them in jeopardy, all these things which gave them good reason to be frustrated with that parent. At the same time, you could have a child, a younger sibling growing up in that household who, because of her younger age and maybe was not old enough to really understand what that parent might have, the poor decisions that parent might have made because of their addiction. There's a real dichotomy that can exist between sisters in the same family, and typically it would be the older one being incredibly angry and frustrated with the parent, where the younger one still holds on to that innocence and belief that they're still my mom. I still love them. I can't hold on to that anger. I don't even have language for that anger. And that was very interesting, I felt, from a dramatic point of view, to explore that dichotomy between an older sister and a younger sister living in the same home but having very different attitudes toward their mother.
And while I was watching the film in this room, and I kind of got in different places, you could hear folks in the audience really kind of gasp or laugh at various parts during that relationship. And the performances that you got, and I hope I'm going to pronounce the names correctly, McKenzie Grace.
McKenna Grace.
McKenna Grace and JoJo Regina.
JoJo Regina, correct.
JoJo Regina. And I felt that their performances were remarkably authentic. Can you talk about what it was like working with these young actors on material that is so emotionally difficult?
We always felt that going into the film, the most challenging thing would be finding two young actresses who could embody these roles and make us believe that they were sisters going through this experience. We were very lucky in the casting of Spider, the actor McKenna Grace. I don't know if anyone here knows who she is. She is, in my opinion, the best young actor of her generation. So we were very lucky that we got her to play Spider. For Jesse, that was going to be even, I felt, the most challenging for us, because Jesse, the character is 10, 11 as we go through the movie. And you got to cast a 10 or 11-year-old if it's going to feel authentic. So how do you find a 10 or 11-year-old to perform this character in a way that is believable? And I was going through a lot of tape, and when JoJo popped up on my screen, it just almost, you felt it right away that there was something very special about this girl. And we had this was virtual. She lives in Texas. We're in LA. We did a virtual callback. She was just embodied the character. It's just one of those things. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't found her.
As we watched What We Hide, one thing kept surfacing beneath almost everything Spider and Jesse do. Trust, or more precisely, the absence of it. They can't trust their mother to care for them. They don't trust adults who are supposed to protect them. And they're terrified that if they trust the child welfare system with the truth, they'll be separated. I asked Dan Kay whether that fear and mistrust were things he encountered while researching the film.
I flew to Ohio from LA, and I traveled Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia with a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist by the name of Julia Keller, who set up dozens of interviews for us throughout that region. One of the incredibly memorable experiences we had was sitting in a small room on the campus of Marshall University with about a dozen caseworkers. We must have sat with them for a good several hours, and we just engaging in a dialogue with these women, and they were all women, just talking to us about their experiences. They refer to in the movie, they refer to the caseworker as a baby snatcher. That came directly from what I learned in talking to these women. They talk.
They use
oh, absolutely, yeah. Okay. Well, yes, and these women in talking about their experiences, one of the many challenging things that they faced was the lack of trust, because for these kids, they know what they represent. They represent the possibility of being pulled away from a parent. These kids are often in these communities, as many of you may know, they have many other friends who are going through the same thing. So they see their parents getting taken away, they see their classmates getting taken away from their parents, or a parent dying and the kids going into the foster system and getting separated. These kids are pretty savvy. They understand that. So as a result, they're very guarded when it comes to the relationship with the caseworker, because they don't want to be taken out of their homes.
One of the people joining the conversation that night was Dolly Sullivan, a clinical social worker in Morgantown who works with individuals and families and specializes in trauma and mental health.
Spider and Jesse are like, you have Jesse, who's kind of more the eternal optimist, right? And doesn't really realize that people can't be trusted until her big sister points it out, right? And so when I think about how, like, from top to bottom, it wasn't just the system that they couldn't trust. It was their mom too, right? And so when I think of it from a trauma perspective, for me, trauma is not what happens, it's how it changes our brain, right? So trauma is a brain change, and it's a disruption in the nervous system. And so when we're traumatized, at the end of the day, our nervous system is seeking safety, right? And so these two girls, particularly Spider, being the first generation of that household in terms of the kids, like, she never experienced safety, right. And, while, Jesse wouldn't say that, at the same time, over time, with the big sister pointing out all the ways we can't trust people, they both came to realize that they cannot trust anyone in their sphere. And so if trauma, from my lens, is a disruption of the nervous system or seeking safety, loss of safety, and they can trust no one, I mean, where do you go? And I feel like that is the piece for Spider that I just feel so heart heavy for, is that she has nowhere to go.
Well, but how do you feel about how in Dan's script that you see the sheriff, and you see the child protective services person, and they're called, as Dan said, and he said a baby snatcher. I think that everybody in the audience would agree that those people are not portrayed as evil people. They're not villains, but yet
when you see your peers, when you're in school, because this is rampant in our state, right? And so when you see your peers at school getting separated from their families and separated from each other as siblings, then it just becomes the norm. And so that becomes the reputation. And of course, it isn't the intent. But again, it goes back to trust. If I can't trust the very people that are supposed to protect me, then how can I trust these strangers that are going to separate me from my sister?
In the movie, What We Hide,
Hey there, girl.
the two sisters aren't only afraid of Child Protective Services. Their mother's addiction has also left them exposed to some of the dangerous people who surrounded her life.
I got your money. $300. I'm gonna give you this and you're gonna leave us alone. Mom's done with you, you understand?
Whatever you say.
I asked Dolly Sullivan whether that kind of vulnerability rang true with what she sees in her work with families in West Virginia.
I ain't done with you, Spider. I ain't done with you.
When I was watching Spider go to the RV where the character
Reese
yeah. was, and I just can remember thinking the whole time, that poor little thing, like, I know what's happening to her nervous system. And that was just one of many examples. But when I think about the ripple effect of trust and lack of it and lack of safety is, what her nervous system must have been going through, knowing that if she didn't do this, they were just going to keep coming back. But the naivety of thinking that they weren't going to come back after this too.
So Dan, this is the reality
impact.
She's speaking about the reality of the situation, but Dan, can you talk a little bit about writing that? And I don't know. I mean, I felt like it just had a big, powerful punch. I mean, it definitely was the bomb under the table. It was the thing that really brought the fear and the tension as to what was going on.
Well, yes. One of the things that was tricky in the writing of it, as it relates to what we're talking about here, was Spider is making a number of decisions throughout the film that my concern was that if you don't have any sort of experience or even tangential experience with this, you might say, what is this girl doing? This is crazy. This is never going to work out. She's going to get hurt. She can get assaulted by this local drug dealer. But that the reality on the ground is, for Spider, she's got to block all. She's got to do, from her point of view, absolutely anything she possibly can to try to keep her sibling and her together. From Spider, and one of the things as many of you might know, is what you see in these situations. Spider has been a surrogate mother to her sister from the beginning. So Spider has these incredibly powerful maternal instincts toward her younger sister. She will do anything it takes to make sure that they stay together. So it was, writing that dynamic was challenging, because I was concerned people would just get frustrated and go, "Oh, girl, come on, this is never going to work out. What are you doing?" But it was so true to the situation. I just had to sort of say, you know what? I hope people will understand that this is for this girl. This reality is dictating these behaviors.
Yeah. So some people might look at her and say, what is she doing? This is impossible. But I look at her and say, wow, like, she's in fight or flight. She said, I will die before I let us be separated. So she is just chronically in this state of fight or flight to keep her family together.
There's another scene that stayed with me. Jessie has an asthma attack. Spider realizes her little sister needs help and rushes her to the hospital.
Tell us what happened. She has asthma. What's her name?
And she doesn't stop to put on her shoes. Later, Spider is sitting in the hospital waiting room, barefoot. It's a tiny visual detail, but for me, it captured the panic of the moment. And I asked Dan whether it had been written that way.
When we're shooting that scene of Jessie having the asthma attack and Spider seeing it and having to rush to the hospital, it wasn't written one way or the other for her to bare feet or put her shoes on. But McKenna and I briefly discussed, well, wait a minute, there's just no way in the world she's stopping to put her shoes on. So we had to, when we had that thought, it changed. It slightly changed the dynamic in the hospital because she's waiting in the waiting room with bare feet. So we ended up on that day we made a few adjustments because it was just so clear. Of course, she's not going to put shoes on. She's got to have bare feet, and we should we should make sure we feature that so the audience understands. That little detail I thought spoke a lot to the reality of the situation.
So, Jim Barry, so much of your professional life is talking about psychiatry, neuroscience, treatment, recovery, and evidence-based care. So, what is it? What do you think we should be paying more attention to these children? Is this something that you folks focus on?
We aspire to.
Okay.
And so, my hope is that all of those people that we train to help be healers in the community would recognize that we are biologic, psychologic, social, and spiritual beings, and that each one of those domains are important to our overall health. And if we neglect or don't consider each of those domains, I think we are truly failing whole person care, how we go about truly helping people heal.
Well, okay, how about a loaded question?
Sure.
I mean, one thing this film tells us is that the systems trying to support families and help children are being stretched beyond capacity.
Yeah.
The loaded question is, I would say, what would you say is the health of our foster care and child protective services system here in West Virginia and maybe in Central Appalachia?
Yeah, Central Appalachia, West Virginia, the United States, it's very broken. It's very stressed. It's very strained. You have a lot of people who are in it for the right reasons, but they are overworked. They are underpaid.
Like we see in the film.
We see in the
on her day off.
On the day off, she has 4 or 5 cases.
The child protective worker.
And she's trying to be present to the situation at hand and is dealing with her own stressors.
Dolly?
Our system, state-wise, Appalachian-wise, national, I mean, our system is not set up in the whole person health, whole person recovery, whole person healing model. And so we're at war with ourselves more than 50% of the time as a result. I mean, it's not a system that is as well supported as they might need to be.
So, Jim Barry, I haven't heard you answer this part about the trust aspect. How important is trust when families interact with treatment providers, child welfare agencies, schools, recovery systems? What happens when that trust is broken and has been broken for a long time?
Yeah, so think about Spider.
Sure.
So she's 14 years old.
She's 15.
15. Okay, so 15 years old. And, from a young age, she was in a very volatile home where she wasn't able to establish the trust that she could have or should have with her mother because of her own mother's problems. And then gets abandoned and is dealing with trying to trust those who would even help her. And she's got her defenses up. Continues to perpetuate. And by the way, she's going to be at very high risk for starting addictive substances herself because of the pain and the agony and the hypervigilance that the fight and flight stuff that she's going through. She gets exposed to alcohol, cannabis, pain pills, whatever it is, and it takes that pain away. You can imagine how seductive that would be then to continue down that path. And when I was first started working here in West Virginia 20 years ago, the common age when I'd ask people, how old were you when you first started using it, would be about 15, 16 years old.
So she's real right at that age.
She would, but nowadays it's more of Jesse's age of 8, 9, 10 years old. So then you think they've got this problem with trust. They've started using. Can you imagine how hard it is when they finally say, I need to change and get help? And they go to the emergency department or whatever, and there's doctors, there's nurses, there's social workers who want to help. you can imagine the defenses and the difficulties it would be for them to actually receive the help they need because of that trust.
Our audience for the screening of the movie, What We Hide, was filled largely with people who treat addiction for a living. I asked Dr. Jim Barry what he hoped they would take away from seeing this story.
I want them to take away the lived experience of children who have been raised in this type of situation. Because part of the battle that I have as an addiction psychiatrist, a doctor who specializes in treating addiction, is I have various people, legislators, principals, whatever it is, who just say, you know what, people are making bad decisions and they should suffer the consequences of their bad decisions. And what I hope a film like this does is at least develop some degree of understanding and empathy for it's not just simply a bad decision problem, but this is a problem that is systemic and starts often in childhood, and very powerful forces are at play from a social standpoint, from a biologic standpoint, a relational standpoint, that make it very difficult for people to get healthy.
Then we opened the conversation to the audience. Many of the people in the room weren't responding to Spider and Jesse only as clinicians. Addiction has touched their own families too.
Okay, I'm Mara. I actually work for Dolly Sullivan up there. I'm a therapist.
Okay.
But last week was posted on Facebook here in our community that there were 400 kids looking for homes and they only placed 5 of them. So just to give you kind of some insight.
So that rings true to the film.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. 405 were placed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another comment or question? Yes, please.
My name is Brittany. I do marketing for the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute. I have also lost a friend to an overdose, so this is something that's very close to me. So I am curious, obviously the audience here today, very well versed in, treating people with addiction, but also their families. Most people, I think, who see the film or listen to this interview aren't in that space. So if someone sees this and is moved by it, what can they do as non-clinicians to take action in some way?
Who'd like to take that on? Dolly, maybe?
I mean, I would just say be available, and I think that that's part of it too, is that like that sheriff didn't hear anything from his daughter. He just kind of felt it. He noticed. He was attuned enough, just human to human, and he had a history with the mom. True, but I think that there are times when we interact with our community members or even friends and family that may not feel safe sharing certain things, but there are things happening and we notice it or just notice enough to know that something's not quite right. I think just being available, just naming that you're a safe place, because I think that's part of the challenge for Spider. Not part of it, it is the challenge, is that no one felt safe. She was completely on an island, and even though she was safe with her friend's dad, who happened to be the sheriff, she didn't feel that, but I do think that there's something to be said about us as just community members, whether we're knowledgeable people or lay people, just being a compassionate presence and just naming that we're available, I think can go a long way.
To put a fine point on what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the power of stories and the power of the medium of film. One of my beliefs in what I'm doing now with this film, and hopefully the film that I'm hoping to do next, is just engender empathy through art. And I really believe very strongly that if you, even if you don't do anything, and by the way, I certainly advocate you doing anything you can, but even just engendering empathy in the viewer that goes a very long way, I think, in just helping at least getting us towards the unachievable goal of universal healing. We're never that's, as I say, unachievable. But if watching a film like this engenders empathy for the people who are going through this, that counts for something.
We've encountered those ripples before on Us and Them. We've reported on grandparents who thought their parenting days were behind them until addiction left them raising grandchildren. We've reported on foster care and on families pulled into systems they never expected to navigate. Watching What We Hide, I kept thinking about all the people orbiting the person struggling with addiction. I asked Dan if he thought those were the stories that were being overlooked.
One of the things that really motivated me to make this movie was I did think that in the art, in film, documentary, literature, I don't think that there is enough of a focus on all the people. So let me back up and say it this way. I think it was, you guys might know better than me, but I think it was 2023 we reached the peak of overdose deaths in this country at something like 103,000 or something like that. So just think about that. 103,000. We just hear that as a statistic. I'll just say 100,000. We think of that. Okay, that's statistic. But each one of those 100,000 had all these people orbiting that one individual. So yes, we lost 100,000 souls tragically, but the impact goes so far beyond that. And I don't think that that's really processed by our society. And I wanted to speak to that.
After a break, we'll hear from people in the room who know exactly what Dan Kay is talking about in his film, What We Hide. Not only as therapists and recovery professionals, but from their own families.
I was a product of parents of addiction. I lost my mom to an overdose. But not only that, it didn't stop there. My kids were taken from me because of my drug addiction.
You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part with a grant from the CRC Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Hey, Trey here, and this is Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Filmmaker Dan Kay made What We Hide to tell a story about what addiction leaves behind. As our conversation continued that evening at West Virginia University, people in the audience began telling us what that looked like in their own lives.
I am Mara. I'm a clinical therapist. So I do really appreciate this film. One, it was really personal to me because I am the sister of a past addict. She passed away in 2015 from an overdose. And so I really appreciated the capture of sisters, whether, this was kind of flipped versus me. I was a younger sister, but I was a freshman in college at WVU, and I was given a 4-year-old. And that was her daughter. That was just the option at the time. My dad was still an active alcoholic. So it really just goes to show you like the amount of stress and stuff put on. And that wasn't really a choice of mine. And it wasn't something I was willing to say no to either. But it's like, it's very difficult. And I don't think that people realize that with an addict, it's really also the family that suffers a lot. And I still continue to suffer. I mean, 11 years later, we just had her 40th birthday. My niece asked all types of questions about her because she was 3 when she passed away. So it's a really good film. It was very touching, and I appreciate that you highlighted it from a sibling standpoint.
There is another consequence that follows addiction through families and communities: stigma. Jim Barry and I have talked about this for years. But that night, he suggested that maybe we've been approaching this problem from the wrong direction.
Something that was said to me a few years ago that I thought was very helpful is we should actually twist things a little bit and focus less on stigma reduction and really focus more on empathy cultivation. And I think that's what this film does, is it's really helping cultivate empathy. Again, I can try to educate everybody I possibly can about the science of addiction and what's happening with the brain and through these processes that keep people doing things that they know are wrong. But to be able to tell a story the way that Dan told this story, that is empathy cultivation. Whereas if I just try to educate, I'm trying to reduce stigma by giving them education. And I think this is so much more powerful.
Yeah. Well, I think that certainly it was essential to me in telling this story was not. It was tricky because the mother, as you all saw, she's passed away in the first frame of the film. But I really wanted to emphasize her humanity throughout the film. And I really wanted to hit particularly hard this notion that, I mean, Jesse's, this innocent 10-year-old says it, and I believe it, is that it is just like cancer. This is a disease. Your mother had a disease. And it's hard for anybody, an adult or a kid, to hold these two truths at once. There's the spider truth that mom, there's this scene in the film where Spider, towards the end of the film, where Spider is rattling off all these horrible things mom did, that is proof for Spider that mom didn't love us.
Mama didn't give a shit about nothing except getting high. That was all she cared about, nothing else. She was a bad person. Don't say that.
And Jesse hears all that, and it's still, no, she I don't care what you say, mom did love us.
Mama was good. She was just sick, messed up, but she was good. She loved us.
And both are true. Mom did do these horrible things, but also mom loved them deeply. And it's hard to hold those two thoughts, I think, for anybody, particularly for kids.
Dolly?
Started to feel like she had permission to consider having empathy for her mom during the photo development period, where he had said, well, they just kind of lose their way and they have a hard time finding their way back. And there was just this long pause that you could see in her. And I think that that's what she battled so much, was that it was the stigma and her feeling a sense of shame herself, right? But also noticing that other people didn't really feel that way, and that she might possibly be able to think and feel differently about her mom, which I thought was beautifully done.
Thank you.
My name is Jamie, and I'm a peer recovery support specialist. And I just had a statement. I wanted to tell you that you can really feel your heart behind this movie, because it really is truth. And it hits home with me because I was a product of parents of addiction. I lost my mom to an overdose. But not only that, it didn't stop there. My kids were taken from me because of my drug addiction. So to show the selfishness behind addiction and how it is a disease, it really hit home in that movie. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I don't want to have you say more, but I mean, that whole idea of you said selfishness. I mean,
yeah.
Can you say more about that? That rang true to you.
Because in the movie, she said, do you remember she was talking to the young one and she said, do you remember mom leaving you outside while it was cold and she was inside getting high? And being that parent that was strung out on drugs and in the addiction, you do things that are so selfish and don't even realize it. And it just pinpointed the little moments in life that addiction steals from the addict, but not just the addict, the ones around them.
Again and again that evening, the conversation returned to empathy. So before we ended, I asked filmmaker Dan Kay one final question. After people watch What We Hide, after the credits roll, what does he hope stays with them?
Yes, well, certainly, I think you come back to the word empathy, Dolly, because that's it. Expanding on that for a second, though, one of the real honors for me is when folks, and we've had some tonight, folks who are in this community, again, and when I'm talking about the community, I'm talking about all sides. I'm talking about first responders like a sheriff. I'm talking about addicts or recovering addicts. I'm talking about foster kids. I'm talking about caseworkers. I have had the privilege of screening this film in many different environments with many different folks, having people who are in that community come up to me and just say the movie made them feel seen. That is very powerful and very meaningful for me.
I'm very grateful to have been invited to this conference. I think I'd even come back again because I just really enjoyed what I've seen and what I've learned. Earlier today in this room, many of us heard Dr. Brian Furline talk about the importance of asking questions that help people tell the truth about what's really happening in their lives. And in many ways, I think that's what recovery asks of people. It asks them to bring into the light that has been hidden by fear, shame, grief, and or secrecy. And I think, Dan, that's what this film is about. And I think that's what it asks of us, to look at that more closely and to notice the people we might otherwise overlook, to see not only the person struggling with addiction, but also the children, the caregivers, the grandparents, families, and those whose lives are shaped by it. And sometimes healing begins when someone finally feels seen. So I want to thank Dan Kay, I want to thank Dr. James Barry, and I want to thank Dolly Sullivan, and I want to thank all of you. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you do and for joining us tonight. And thank you so much.
You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this episode is me, Trey Kay, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to filmmaker Dan Kay for allowing us to share excerpts from What We Hide. Thanks to Dr. James Barry of the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute at West Virginia University, and to clinical social worker Dolly Sullivan for joining our conversation. And also thanks to Lisa Terrace, Katie Chiason Downs, and Starlet Middleton for making arrangements for me to participate at the conference. And thanks to the people in the audience who shared their experiences with addiction, recovery, and caregiving. This conversation was recorded at the Carl Raleigh Sullivan Addiction Training Institute at West Virginia University in Morgantown. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Abed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible, with additional support from the CRC Foundation. If you got thoughts about this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Share them with us on our Facebook page or on X, formerly known as Podcast. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From PRX.